Hey, we're here at Life Point, and I'm taking over the podcast this week. So we're taking over. All right.
So good.
So, because I flew all the way up here.
Listen, thank you,
brought
Pastor Lee.
beautiful weather.
You did.
It's like 80 degrees. We sat in the blue chairs over there.
In Everett.
If
So nice.
you don't know where that is, don't worry about it. So we're here post-message, and we're in this series, Practicing the Way. And
well, it's actually called The Way of Jesus, but it's okay. You can say practicing.
But it's based on the idea
Yes,
of practicing the way.
It is.
And so over the last few weeks, maybe people have come or maybe they've missed. So kind of summarize like what this journey has been about, and maybe talk a little bit about where you went today, because we went two different directions at our two different locations. So
yeah, Lee got to speak over in Marysville, and so that was great. But it's really just about how are we being formed, right? John Mark Comer talks about the fact that we're being formed. Every one of us are being formed by something or someone. And so how are we being formed into the likeness of Jesus? And so today I really just talked about the fact of doing good works, and also the fact of faith and how they kind of work together. And then ultimately at the end saying they ultimately work together when we live surrendered.
that's awesome.
You know?
Is that why you wore the shirt?
Hey, do good.
I like
Let's
it.
go. I don't know
Free-
how to pronounce Cotopaxi.
Free advertisement.
Listen,
though. Get yourself
hey.
a shirt. That's pretty. You know what's interesting is I'm listening to you say that, and I didn't get to hear your message because obviously I was
It
over
could
at the
change
other
your life.
location. But
It would.
it's interesting when we talk about transformation, because one of the things that happens is we become part of it. Maybe we become part of a church community. We show up every week,
Yeah.
and we go through I don't want to say motions, because there's something that happens when we're together, which we believe is powerful, but there's also sometimes not the expectation of transformation, right? Like we come and we're like, okay, that was cool. And so it sounds like this series in particular today, you were kind of pressing on like, there is that sense of like what's happened to us should be kind of flowing out of us.
Yeah.
It shouldn't just be an internal thing. That's kind of what we did over there. So I was in the story, the narrative in John chapter 4 of Jesus, where he goes, John says he had to go through Samaria, which he actually didn't have to, but he did. And so he goes through this area that the Jewish people would avoid.
Yeah.
And it's the story of the narrative of him sitting at the well with the woman, which is really 3 strikes against him interacting with her.
Yeah.
You know, she's Samaritan, she's a woman, and her reputation was not stellar. But what's amazing in the story is that Jesus gives her space to kind of explore, but then at the same way kind of invites her into that living water. And so the bridge for the way was, you know, what does that look like for us to invite people to the table? And you know, how difficult that really is. We kind of got a little honest, because it's one of those things that we nod and go, yeah, we should, you know, diversity is very cool and all of that.
Yeah.
But in real time, we kind of like people that like us and are like us a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a lot of fun.
That's why we gravitate toward it.
Yeah, so that's the challenge for today out there.
So how was it in dealing with transformation? Like, again, at the same thought process of this all leading to how are we going to be transformed? How did you kind of tie that in?
Well, I think the idea is really what I love about this series is the idea is that there's theology involved.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And there's
for sure.
But then there's like the practical of transformation also isn't like a magic dust. So part of how I challenged them was to ask questions around. I used a couple pictures of what might be an indicator of who's open to them being at the table.
Sure.
Question number 1 was kind of the idea of who sits in the middle seat when you're flying on a plane, right?
Sure.
The idea of who do you invite or disinvite to sit there?
Yeah.
Because for me, when I get on an airplane, my initial thing is to sit by the window. I'm a window guy.
Okay.
And then if you're on Southwest, then you keep your head down, right? You don't look up. You don't want you keep your head down because you know put your bag there. But
Listen,
then
I put my leg over there, dude.
Right.
I'm like this.
Then the flight attendant's going to get on and say, you know, every seat's going to be taken on this flight. At that point, I change strategies. At that point, I'm making eye contact with people that I want to sit there. And that filter is kind of interesting because it's funny, right? But at the same time, I don't know if I really want to dive too deep into who I make eye contact with and who I don't. Because there's something there maybe that I don't really like about myself as far as like who sits there and who doesn't. So we kind of use that as, again, it's bigger than who sits in the middle. That's the thing of like this week, who across your cul-de-sac, who in the cubicle next to you, who in the hallway at your school, et cetera. Who's that person that you probably really need to kind of invite into that
I
space.
think it's almost like the same. It's amazing how God works, because it's almost like the same thing that we talked about in this sense of trying to find our red dot moment. Like, where are we right now?
Okay.
Right.
Tell me about that.
Well, so in the sense of, along the spiritual spectrum, where are we? Just so that we can understand where we might want to go and what our next step is. Right. Mm-hmm. And so trying to figure out that red dot, like when you go to a mall or whatever, and it says you are here, and you're just trying to figure out where to go next.
It never helps me that much.
Listen, it helps me because I just look for all the exits, because that's where I want to go.
But then I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't go to the mall anymore anyway.
Are there malls?
Listen, Amazon Prime, bro.
Are there malls? Are there malls?
There's like 3 in all of America.
Alderwood
Mall. What else? The Outlet Mall.
Everett Mall.
Is there? I'm not even sure.
And South Center.
South Center
will never die.
Listen, you might die if you go there.
Tell me about the red dot. Seriously, like, how does that metaphor, how does it apply to me?
Well, I just think, so we have a value around here, and it's that we all have a next right step.
Yeah.
Right. So every single one of us, regardless of if we're not yet a follower of Jesus or we've been a follower of Jesus for 30 years, every one of us has a next right step.
I would assume that next step has to do with transformation or the desire for
Absolutely.
it.
So it's whether or not God is constantly nudging, and it's just whether or not we're gonna. My friend says, "Don't begrudge the nudge." Right. It's whether we're gonna take that or not. I know that's Mike Wilson. Love the guy here. Shout out for Mikey Dub. But it's a great deal. But really, just trying to figure out, okay, if this is where I'm at, then this is where I want to go. Then what's our next right step? And we just believe that God's going to tell us, and we want to take it.
Yeah, and it's all just these habits and disciplines. One of the things how many more weeks in the series?
Well, it's more than just that, though.
Okay, tell me.
Well, so the very last part of what we talked about here was Revelation 3, right? Where Jesus is writing to the church of Laodicea, and he's saying, "Hey, I know all your good works, and I know that you're rich in all this, but really what you are is naked, blind, desperate, all of those types of things, because they were so self-sufficient and so prideful."
Okay.
Where the reality is
that the passage where they're about to get spewed?
Well, exactly. Spewed out, right? Spit out, because it's lukewarm, right? And we often don't really understand what's actually happening. But real quick, what we talked about was the fact that there was a hot spring in Hierapolis and there was a cold spring in Colossae, and they created aqueducts to get to Laodicea, to get the water to there. And basically at the end of it, it's no longer hot or no longer cold. It's actually lukewarm. And it created people are getting sick. And so, Jesus makes mention of this. You think you're rich, and you think you're self-righteous, and you think you're great, but you're lukewarm, and that's why I want to spit you out. So you have this great metaphor that he's actually using what's happening around there, but in the same way saying, I am actually the living water, and I am actually what you've been searching for your entire
John 4.
life. Yes, exactly.
With the gal at the well, same thing, right?
Same
you don't
thing.
need to drink this water. It's a
Precisely.
spiritual thirst, not a physical thirst that you really...
But all of that equals surrender in order to move forward in your next right step, right? Where it's not about self-sufficiency, but it's actually about, how do I surrender this area of my life?
It feels like a tension, right?
Yeah.
Which is an overused metaphor, right? But there's
decisions
to be made and tensions to be managed.
Sure.
Right? In this case, it feels like a tension between surrender and disciplines in some ways,
yes,
right?
Yes,
because
yes.
it's like, well, I'm surrendered. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like that is a step, but at the same time, that surrender should lead to
that's right
disciplines
an
of
outflow,
change, right? An outflow of change
of wherever you're at, leading toward God,
right? Whatever those disciplines are, and you've kind of navigated all of that during this.
Well, we
series.
tried to navigate that throughout the series, but even today, in talking from the book of James and saying how your works, without works, your faith is dead, type of mentality. Try to juxtapose that a little bit with the Apostle Paul, but at the same time, just say, hey, you know what? It's a natural outflow. It's the reason why we do good things, but it's not actually the good things that make us righteous, right? It's we do this because we are trying to become more and more like Jesus,
And in the absence of good things happening as an outflow in your life, there may be something to examine as far as what is going on.
For sure,
right? Because
for sure.
To have faith with faith without works,
dead.
And so but also works without faith is really just something that's awesome, but not really generated from a place in relationship with God.
Absolutely, bro. Absolutely.
Dude, we had a good steak last night.
Hey, we did.
We did. We
I
can't really
appreciate
talk
you.
about it. We can't really talk about it,
Why?
but it was good.
I thank you.
It was
you
only
paid. It was amazing.
Well, it was only my second time having the Wellington.
The beef Wellington.
The beef Wellington.
Yes.
And
The
so-
Yorkshire pudding. Oh my gosh.
So what was in the Wellington?
I mean, I think there's like a mushroom.
I really don't
paste.
know what's in there.
What's a puff pastry?
Puff
right?
pastry. Can you
And
say
got a little
puff
filet
pastry
mignon.
one more time?
Puff pastry. No, it's puff.
Puff.
And then we have
Not a
we have-
crepe.
no, puff.
Got it.
There's a mushroom type of like amazing,
Like a spread?
like a mushroom spread crudité. Oh my!
Okay.
Oh!
People don't know this, but Rusty used to be a food and beverage guy.
I was the food and beverage director, Spanish Trail Golf Country Club.
That's right.
It was great.
It's good. So you did this,
And then you took me
what-
away from
then what
free steak
happens?
and free golf.
So it's
that's
got-
what happened. That's
I
why you
got the
paid last
puff,
night.
and then I'm rubbing the mushroom, and then
And
what?
then you have filet mignon.
Is it filet mignon?
It's
That-
filet
I was
mignon.
actually.
It
I
is.
felt
That's
kind
what
of
is
like
you
an
were
idiot.
indulging in filet mignon.
And then you kind of bake it or whatever.
Yes, they do.
And the puff.
About
puffs.
375 right in there. 20 minutes. It's great.
It was stellar, and it was sitting on a bed of mashed. But just to be clear, I had twice baked, a little cube. It was good. I cut it and gave my friend half. I did not experience the mashed potatoes. There was no offer of the mash to come my direction.
Listen,
it was
listen.
literally beef Wellington,
Listen.
no mash. And so
Listen.
I just want to say, when you think about the way of Jesus
Well, okay.
and the sacrifice and the giving of Christ, there's growth that still needs to come.
Yeah, you know
in your
what?
life.
I hear it. I receive
and I believe
it. I receive
as well,
it.
if we would have measured the half of Wellington
Wow. See,
against the
now,
half.
now we're looking at the speck in someone's eye and not the log in the other eye.
fair.
So here's where we're at right now. But I want to thank you for joining us this week on Extra. We appreciate you. We love you. I hope you have a great week.